Hello everyone, we are back, and in this video lecture, we will cover PowerPoint lecture 3, which is already uploaded on your eCampus, and basically we will finish chapter 2 in your book. If you remember lecture 2, last class what we discussed was first part of chapter 2, and then in this video lecture and lecture 3 of the PowerPoint slides, we will cover the rest of the items in chapter 2 and finish this chapter up. So just a quick refresher, last class we talked about two different types of efficiency, productive efficiency versus allocative efficiency. We want to remind this here a little bit now because we will learn about a diagram, we will learn about a concept that is necessary to understand productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. So allocative efficiency, which is also known as economic efficiency, is achieved when output is maximized with limited amount of resources, cost is minimized, and at the same time consumer utility is maximized. So when we meet these three conditions, then we have allocative efficiency. Output is maximized with limited resources, cost is minimized, and consumer satisfaction or consumer utility is maximized. Then we also learned about the other concept called the productive efficiency. This focuses on the producer side or the business side, and we have productive efficiency basically when the output is maximized with the limited number of resources and the cost is minimized, but consumer satisfaction is not maximized. So we don't either have any information on consumer utility, or we are unable to maximize the consumer satisfaction, and in that case we will have productive efficiency, because on the production side, on the business side, they are efficient, but we were not able to make the consumers happy, so we could not maximize consumers utility. Okay, consumers may not desire the goods to be produced even they are at productive efficiency, like in the example I gave for missiles or aircrafts. Consumers, normal people, may not want those, so even if they are produced efficiently, we will not have consumer satisfaction that is maximized. We also talked about the free market economy. We definitely talked about traditional economy, command economy, and then we focus mainly on the free market economy. And under a free market economy, the demand and supply, the demand from the consumers and supply from the businesses, they interact freely to determine the market price. And then we asked 4 questions when we are allocating resources: what to produce, how to produce, who to produce for, and what the price to sell at, as well as the efficiency and competition. Okay, and in a free market economy, we will always have very limited government who will be there to facilitate market, but not to put any type of interference or some type of barriers. We also learned about comparative advantage versus absolute advantage. These are two very important concepts. I also did an example last class trying to separate it out between what absolute advantage means and how what comparative advantage means, and how countries use comparative advantage concept to specialize in different products and engage in trade with one another. As a quick review, absolute advantage is basically the ability of a nation to produce a good or service more efficiently than another nation. So absolute advantage is when a country can produce more quantity than another country given the same amount of resources. So under absolute advantage, we focus on quantity, whereas on comparative advantage is basically the ability of a nation to produce a good or service more efficiently than another country and at a lower opportunity cost. So a country that has lower opportunity costs on producing a good will have comparative advantage on that good and will produce that good, and basically they will trade the other goods from the other countries. And this eventually leads to trade specializations, and countries with comparative advantage will produce the goods and trade the good from the other countries, just what I said. So this was just a quick review. The chapter 2 also gives us a brief history of the American economy. This is not very important, but I just wanted to give want to give you a brief idea about how the overall American economy evolved over the years and how it changed based on consumers and businesses. Okay, so in the 1800s, very early times, America obtained financial and economic capital from Europe. Basically, if you remember, America was first, people from Europe came to America to settle in, and so basically they obtained the economic and financial capital from Europe. Railroads was a very instrumental part for transportation. They distributed goods and services throughout the country, as America is huge, and American businesses were also connected through railroads. And there was actually a monopoly in railroad, meaning that there was only one entity controlling the railroad, okay, as well as banking and steel industry. So during the 1800s, we had monopoly, meaning one firm or one business controlled, or basically one firm produced or provided this service. So there was a monopoly in railroad, monopoly in banking, monopoly in steel industry. And then the government played an important part, and because a monopoly is not good for the consumers. Consumers will never be happy, or they will not achieve maximum satisfaction because they will have to pay higher prices. They don't have any other options to go to. So the producer can charge high prices to the consumers, and they don't have any other options. So in 1890, in response to that, the government passed the Antitrust Act, which broke this monopoly and created competition. Basically, there more producers came into the market because of this act, and as a result, competition came up and efficiency went up. Then in the early 1900s, we saw the rise of the labor union. Laborers, they flocked together, they gathered together to demand for higher wages. Natural resources were abundant during that time, because there was very less people living at that time. So there were a lot of natural resources, but there was a shortage of labor. People did not have the skills at that time. Okay, so many times businesses were taking advantage of them, paying very low wages. So that in response to that, the labor created labor unions, and so they can fight for their wages. They can ask for a fair wage for which they are performing work for. So since the standard of living was low for labor at that time, they formed unions and present collective bargaining about the distribution of income. Then in the 1930s, a depression, that's the Great Depression, happened in the economy. Unemployment jumped up very high. Most of the people were losing their jobs. There was no demand in the market. And that's when we shifted from a classical model to a Keynesian model. And we're going to learn about these models later in the chapter. Or if you took a macro class, you probably already know about these classical theory and Keynesian theory. But as an introduction, before the Great Depression, we were trying to explain our economic model through the classical theory. But then during Depression, the classical theory was failing. It was not able to explain what was going on in the economy, as people were losing jobs. There was no demand. Inventories in the market was going up. So in response, then at that time, the government shifted to Keynesian policy, which helped to recover, or which helped to bring the economy back to equilibrium. And we're going to learn about this later. And this was popular in the 1950s and 1960s. And then in 1970s, then a new policy came in called the New Classical Theories, or Neoclassical Theories. And we're going to learn about this more, but it is just to give you a brief introduction that before the Depression, we had the classical theory. During the Depression, when we were going through this turmoil, we used the Keynesian policy to come out of the Depression and stabilize. And then we in order to understand the economy better, and then there was a small recession during the 1970s oil shock. That's when we switched from Keynesian to New Classical Theory to explain our economic model. And even today we use a combination of Keynesian and New Classical Theory to understand what's going on in the economy. Then in the 1960s, we had social attitude changes. People believed in greater equality and greater income. There was a lot of laws passed, for African Americans, for women, and we believe that all men are equal, started to believe that, and that had a great impact on how jobs are available and what the income should be. The Vietnam War added certain turmoils, and in whole evolution, change has only been constant. It will continue. Change, we have always been experiencing change, and this will always happen. Even during this coronavirus pandemic, we are having to change our ways of life, change how the economy is operating. So every time the economy is always evolving, and it will go on, but we have to understand the basic principles on how it operates and how we can help the economy to remain stable. So now we move on to a very important topic, which is called the production possibility model, PPM, or production possibility frontier, also known as PPF. So these can be used interchangeably, PPM or PPF. They mean the same thing. Basically what this is a graphical representation that helps us to illustrate the maximum potential output of a society at a given point of time. So basically this is a graph that gives us the maximum potential output that an economy can obtain at a particular point of time, like as of June 30th or as of May 30th, what is the maximum combination of output this economy can achieve. That's what the PPM shows. Over time it can change, it can move up or down, it can shift up and down, but basically it is at a particular point of time. And when we are looking at this model, there are three assumptions that we are going to make. So what are those three assumptions? For the first assumption is the society produces only two goods or services, and these are graphed in various combinations using the x-axis and y-axis. So basically when we are looking at a PPF, we will only consider two goods or two services. That's an assumption we make. We will make, let's say, clothing or computer, or let's say pizza and sugar, or let's say education and healthcare service. So we will just take two services or two goods and plot one of them on x-axis and plot the other one on the y-axis, and then we look at it based on those two goods or services. Okay. Then the second assumption we make is the factor of productions remain constant in time and are fully used. So when we are looking at the PPF, we will assume that the quantity of the resources or the quantity of the factors of production are fixed. They are not changing, they are not increasing or decreasing, and they will be used fully. So that's the second assumption. And last, the third assumption when we are looking at a PPF is that technology will remain constant and there will be no advancement taking place. Okay, so it is basically saying when we are looking at a PPF, there are three assumptions. We only take two goods or two services. One plots on the x-axis, the other plots on the y-axis. Then the factors of production are fixed in quantity and are fully used. And the third one is technology. There is no new innovations, no new advancements. It is constant. Whatever it was, it is still that. If we have advancements, then there will be changes in the PPF. Therefore, when we are looking at a PPF, we are assuming that these three assumptions are in place. So let me draw a PPF so you understand how it looks, and then I will try to explain you how it is very useful. The PPF itself, or the PPM, the production possibility model or the production possibility frontier, gives us a lot of information, and it may be very helpful to understand, especially from the business side, and the economy. So let me draw a graph and then try to explain you. Okay. A PPF will usually look like this. Okay, not necessarily it will look like this all the time, but most of the time they look like this. Let's assume we consider two goods. Remember, one of the assumptions we make is that the society has only two goods. So let's say in this case we assume the two goods are on the y-axis we have computers, and on the x-axis let's say we have clothing. So these are the two goods we have. Now let me label the points. I'm going to be taking different points. And explain you what these points mean. But first let me finish drawing this graph. This is 11. Okay, so this is how a PPF will look like, and these are the different points that can happen in a PPF. Okay, so the ones that I'm marking in purple, these are the different types of points where an economy can be. Okay, so I mean, it can be also anywhere on the graph or anywhere inside the graph, but basically these are the possible outcomes of a PPF. These are the possible results that the PPF will have. Okay, so based on this, what we can say is basically this model diagram describes the various output combinations that are possible for computer and clothing. So this graph gives us the various possible outcomes of computer and clothing that we can have. So let's say if we look at point A, which is this point, at point A we have 10 computers, right? We have 10 computers and it's on the y-axis, so it's 0 clothing. Okay, then we have point B. Point B is basically 8 computers and 4 clothings. Point C is 5 computers and 8 clothing. Point D is 0 computers, right, because it's on the x-axis, and 10 clothing. Okay, then we have a point E, this point. Point E is basically we have 4 computers and 3 clothings. And finally, we have one last point, which is point F. Point F, this one, it has 11 computers and 10 clothes. Okay, so what is it is giving is this graph is giving that at a particular point of time, what are the different combinations of computer and clothing an economy can have. If the economy is operating at point A, so if the economy is operating at point A, if the economy is operating here, then that means they are producing 10 computers and 0 cloth at that time. Let's say the economy is operating at point C. That means at that time the economy is producing 5 computers and 8 clothings. It can operate at point E, which means the economy is providing 4 computers and 3 clothings at that time. So basically this graph gives us the various combinations of clothing and computer or any other two goods at any particular point of time an economy can produce. If the economy wants to be here, they can be here. If the economy wants to be here, they can be here. So it's the economy can choose to be at any point they want to be at a particular point of time. They can choose to be at any point of time. Okay, so now we try to understand what each of these points means. Okay, so anytime we are on the graph, anytime we are on this line, any point on the line, we are productively efficient. So in this case, point A, point B, point C, and point D, these are all on the line. So that means these are all productively efficient, meaning, remember, what does productive efficiency means? Productive efficiency means the cost is minimized and output has been maximized. So anytime we are operating on the line, that means the output has been maximized and cost is minimized. So we are productively efficient. Okay, so any points on the line means we are productively efficient. However, we are not, do we know whether it is allocatively efficient? We don't, because this graph does not provide us any information about consumer utility or consumer satisfaction. So even though point A, B, C, or D, they are productively efficient, we don't know if it maximizes consumer satisfaction or consumer utility. So we don't have any information about allocative efficiency. So this is important. If I ask you in a question or in a homework that is point B allocatively efficient, then your answer should be it is productively efficient, but we do not know whether it is allocatively efficient or not because we don't have any information about consumer utility. Same thing applies for point A, point C, point D, any point on the line. If we are operating on any point on the line, the output is maximized, cost is minimized, but we don't have any information about consumer utility, so we don't know if it is allocatively efficient or not. Okay, so this is the first thing you need to know. Then the second thing you need to know is we have to look at point E. Point E is this one, right? Point E. What does point E represent? Point E represents inefficiency. Okay, so point E represents, or this point represents inefficiency. So anytime we are operating below the line, okay, so anytime we are operating below the line, anytime we are operating anywhere here, here, or here, or here, anytime we are operating below the line, we are inefficient. We are not using the resources fully. So point E or anywhere, the point E or anywhere below the line represents inefficiency. Okay, what that means is basically we are not using the resources efficiently and the output has not been maximized, because at this point we can be actually going up here. Okay, so we can move to that point. So whenever we are on the graph, we are productively efficient, but whenever we are inside the graph, we are inefficient. And inefficiency happens because of two reasons. The two reasons are, one is unemployment of resources that can cause inefficiency. The other one is called underemployment of resources. These two factors can cause the economy to operate below the graph, and that will cause inefficiency. Okay, so what does unemployment and underemployment of resources mean? Okay, underemployment of resources is basically when a resource is not efficiently and fully used. Let's say I have a room to manufacture shoes. Okay, I have one big room to manufacture shoes, but I'm only using half of the room to produce shoes. That is underemployment. I am not fully using my resources or my facility to produce shoes, so that will cause inefficiency, and at that time I will operate below the curve. The other reason for cause of inefficiency is unemployment of resources. So that means when some resources are totally unused. Examples would include some workers being unable to find a job or manufacturing plant, or when a manufacturing plant is shut down. So if someone is unable to find a job, or if there is a shut down manufacturing plant that is not operational, then that we are not employing that resource, so that's unemployed, and that's why we have inefficiency. So these two reasons can cause inefficiency, and in that case we will operate below the graph. There is one more point in this graph that we have to understand. Can you see which one is that? We already talked about A, we talked about B, we talked about C, D, and E, but we do have a point called point F. So this point F, where in this graph we have 11 computers and 10 clothings, right? This point F is outside your normal curve. It's outside your normal curve. It's outside, right? It's outside your curve. So this point F represents unattainable point. So point F is basically unattainable / unachievable. So what that means is, given the amount of resources you have and given the technology you have, it is not possible to produce that combination for the economy. Okay, so that's what it basically means. unattainable and unachievable. So basically what I'm trying to say is, given the amount of resources and technology I have, it is not possible to produce 11 computers and 10 clothings. Okay, we don't have that resources, have that amount of resources to reach that level of combination of output, because anytime we are operating outside the graph, anywhere, that is an unattainable combination or unachievable combination. We cannot achieve that point because right now we don't have the resources or we don't have the technology to achieve that. Now in the future it can change, but at this particular point of time this combination is not achievable. So see, this graph gives us a lot of information, right? It gives us if the economy is productively efficient or not, if the economy is operating at an inefficient point, and then it also lets us know whether in the future what is if it's an unattainable point, if it's a future, in the future I can achieve that point or not. But other than this, there are a lot of other information that the PPF gives. Okay, so this PPF, this production possibility frontier, can have frontier shifts. So it's called frontier shift. Okay, so what it's basically saying is a PPF looks like this, but this PPF can shift to the right or it can shift to the left. Okay, that's what it's trying to say by frontier shift. Frontier shifts means the PPF or the PPM can shift to the right or to the left because of certain circumstances. Now when we experience economic growth, when the economy is growing, the PPF will shift to the right. Our focus will be to shift the PPF to the right. Why is that? Because if we shift to the right, that means we can produce more output, right? We are having various, an unattainable point may now become achievable, right? Because that is good for everyone. People are getting more output, people are getting more goods and services, so that is good. So we want the curve to shift to the right. Now what are some of the factors that can cause the curve to shift to the right? One of the main reasons that can cause the curve to shift to the right is called economic growth, right? When there is a growth, when economy is growing, the curve will shift to the right. When the amount of resources we have increases, then the curve will shift to the right. So let's say if we discover a new oil site, or if we discover a new gold site or new mining site which has a lot of gold reserves, then definitely if it's a product that uses, if it's a jewelry, then the output of jewelry will go up and the curve will shift to the right. Okay, so if the amount of resources go up, then the curve will shift to the right. Similarly, let's say if more skilled people are moving into Texas, then the curve will shift to the right because there are more skilled people who can work now. So any factor, any increase in the amount of amount for any of the factors of production will cause the curve to shift to the right. Another factor that can cause the curve to shift to the right is technology. If there is improvement in technology or advancement in technology, then the curve will shift to the right. For instance, in the 1980s, when internet was invented, that's when the curve shifted to the right. There was a big jump to the right for most goods for PPF, because internet changed the way we do business, and that caused the PPF or the PPM graph to shift to the right. Okay, so technological advancement or increase in the amount of resources will cause the PPF to shift to the right. Now what will cause the PPF to shift to the left? Again, it's just the opposite. If we have a decrease in the amount of resources, it will shift to the left. If there is a technological disruption, then we will have a shift to the left in the PPF. Let's say if there is a wildfire and we're looking into forest or timber, then definitely the PPF will shift to the left because wildfire destroys the trees and therefore we will not have enough timber and the PPF will shift to the left. Natural disasters, hurricanes, war, all these factors can cause the PPF to shift to the left. So hopefully you guys understand what it means now when we talk about frontier shift of the PPF. the entire frontier, when the entire frontier shifts outwards, it means that the amount of resources available have either increased or the level of technology has changed. The examples are already something that I have discussed. Again, the economic growth can cause the curve to shift to the right, and that's what our main focus is. We want the curve to shift to the right. Okay, so then there's another thing that we have to look into is the opportunity cost of PPF. Okay, so we can calculate the opportunity cost of moving from one point to another when we are looking at a PPF. Okay, so let's say again we have this PPF, computers and clothings. Okay, and then we have this graph. Here we have 10, here we have 10, and let's say at this point we have 8 and 4, and at this point we have 5 and 3. Okay, now let's say the economy is operating at point B. Now they want to move to point C. Okay, so the economy initially is operating at point B. Well, point B, we have 8 computers and 4 clothings. Now they want to move to point C, which has 5 computers and 3 clothings. Okay, I'm sorry, this is going to be 7 clothings, not 3, 7 clothings. That's a mistake for me, my apologies. So 7 clothings. At point C, we will have 5 computers and 7 clothings. Okay, so my first question is it a good move to move from point B to point C? This can be a question in your exam or homework. Let's say the economy is moving from point B to C. Is it a good move? So your answer should be we don't know, right? Maybe it is a good move for people who like clothes because we are producing more clothes, but it is not a good move for people who like computers because we are producing less computers now. So the answer should be we don't know, because the production possibility frontier does not give us any information about consumer utility. Yes, both these points, both point B and point C, are productively efficient. In terms of the supplier side, business side, they are efficient, but we don't have any information about consumer utility. So we do not know if consumers are more happy at point B or if consumers are more happy at point C. So the answer should be we don't know, because we don't have any information about consumer utility. Okay, so that's one thing. Now the second thing is we can also calculate opportunity cost. Remember, we talked about this in the first class from this diagram. So my question can be, if I'm moving from point B to point C, what is my opportunity cost? So what is opportunity cost of moving from B to C? Okay, so that's what my question can be. If I'm moving from B to C, what is my opportunity cost? So again, let's do it here clearly. We know point B has coordinates 8 computers and 4 clothings, and point C, where we want to be, has 5 computers and 7 clothings. Okay, so what is the opportunity cost when we are moving from point B to point C? So in order to gain 3 additional, so when we are moving from point B to point C, we are gaining 3 additional clothes. Right, previously we were able to get 4 clothes. Now we are able to get 7 clothes, so we are gaining 3 additional clothes. But what are we giving up? We are giving up 3 computers, right? Before we used to have 8 computers. Now we are producing more clothes, so resources are limited, so we are directing some of the resources towards clothing. So as a result, we are going to be able to produce less computers, so which means 5 computers we are producing. That means we are giving up 3 computers, and this is our opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost of moving from point B to point C is 3 computers. Again, if we go up, if we are moving from point B to C, we are giving up 3 computers, and that is our opportunity cost. So again, this is important because we can calculate opportunity cost from PPF as we move from one point to another point. Same way, if we move from point C to point D, we can calculate the opportunity cost, right? At point C, we have 5 computers and 7 clothings, and at point D, we have 10 clothings and 0 computers. So in order to achieve 3 more computers, we are giving up 5 computers. 3 clothings. In order to achieve 3 clothings, we are giving up 5 computers. So our opportunity cost, if from moving from point C to point D, will be this 5 computers. Okay, so I can give you a graph and I can ask you, if I'm moving from one point to another, what is the opportunity cost, and that's how you will calculate it. And it's very important you understand this. Okay, so this is another thing we can obtain from opportunity from a PPF. One last thing I want to discuss about a PPF is basically, and I want to draw that so it's clear to you guys. The PPF can take different shapes. Although I said that the PPF usually looks like this, but it can take different shapes. Okay, and I want to draw the different shaped graphs so you understand. So this is one shape we can have. This is another shape we can have, and the third shape we can have is like this. Okay, so these are the 3 different types of shapes that the PPF can have. PPF. Okay, they can have any of these 3 shapes. Now, most common one is usually we look at this one, but what differentiates this? It is the opportunity cost that differentiates it. Remember, we looked when we move from one point to another, we look at the opportunity cost. So that's what we are talking about. Let's say we talk about the computer and clothing again. This is 10, this is 8 and 4, this is 5 and 7, and this is again 10. So if you calculate the opportunity cost, you will see when we move from point A to point B, this is B, this is C, this is D. When we are moving from point A to point B, what are we giving up? We are giving up 2 computers. When we are moving from point B to point C, we are giving up 3 computers. And we are moving from point C to point D, we are giving up 5 computers. So if you see, the opportunity cost is going up as we go from point A to B, B to C, C to D. So when we have an increasing opportunity cost, we will have a shape like this. So in case of increasing opportunity cost, the shape of the graph will be concave or bulging outwards. In case of increasing opportunity cost, we will have a shape like this. Okay, now if it's a straight line, that means we have a constant opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is not increasing. So let's say point A, point B, C, and D. So opportunity cost, let's say, is 2 computers, 2 computers, and 2 computers. So it remains fixed. If we move from point A to point B, the opportunity cost is 2 computers. If you move from point B to C, the opportunity cost is 2 computers. If you move from point C to D, the opportunity cost is still 2 computers. So opportunity cost remains fixed or constant, and therefore the PPF is a straight line, downward sloping straight line. Okay, so if it's an increasing opportunity cost, it will be bulging outwards. If it's a constant opportunity cost, it will be a straight line. Now it will be bulging inwards if it is a decreasing opportunity cost. Okay, so let's say this is point A, point B, point C, point D. What that means is here we are giving up more computers. Here is 4 computers, here is 3 computers. So see, the opportunity cost is decreasing as we are going. So that's why it is called decreasing opportunity cost, and that's when we are going to have this type of shape. So looking at the shape of the PPF, you can tell if it has an increasing opportunity cost, or if it has a constant opportunity cost, or if it has a decreasing opportunity cost. Increasings look like this, constant is a straight line, and decreasing is bulging inwards. And based on the shape, you can tell about the opportunity cost between those two products. Okay, so we are going to have increasing opportunity cost or decreasing opportunity cost when the factors of production are not perfectly shiftable. What that basically means is when resources are not as good at producing one thing as they are producing the other. Okay, again, let's look at computer and clothing. Okay, so we are going to have increasing opportunity cost. Let's say we need metals, let's say we need steel to make computers, just as an example, or let's say we need glass to make computers. Okay, so if we are shifting those glass towards the production of clothing, it's not that beneficial, it's not perfectly shiftable, right? We don't need glass to produce clothing, right? So basically the resources are not perfectly shiftable. Or in another way, let's say I am very efficient in making a laptop, okay, but I don't have any skills to make clothes. So when the economy is increasing production of clothing, they are shifting my job from laptop production to cloth production. I am not that very efficient now, right? I am not perfectly substitutable. Maybe I was able to produce 5 laptops before in an hour, but now I can only produce 2 clothes in an hour. So the resources are not perfectly shiftable, and that's why we have increasing opportunity cost or decreasing opportunity cost. Basically what it means is when resources are not as good at producing one thing as they are at producing another. You know, there's an example in the book for wine and beer production. You can have a look at it and try it, and that will also help you to understand what it means when we are talking about perfectly shiftable. So PPM is very important, right? PPM gives us a lot of information. The production possibility frontier gives us a lot of information, and we want to know what these information are, because it plays an important role when we are looking at it in the economy, right? So it gives us information about the scarcity of resources, how much resources we have, right? So it tells us the information about the scarcity of resources. It tells us about opportunity costs. It tells us about technological improvement. If we have technological improvement, then it will shift to the right, or if there is disruption, it will shift to the left. Then it also gives us information about whether it is productively efficient or not, if the economy is operating at a productively efficient point or not. And then it also tells us, how we can achieve an unattainable point in the future. We might have that as a target in the future. We want to be at that point, and because of technological improvement or discovery of new resources, we can achieve that point. Now, one item we don't know from PPM is consumer utility or allocative efficiency. We do not have information about consumer satisfaction, and as a result we cannot tell if consumers are going to be happy or if we are going to achieve allocative efficiency. Even if we move from one point to another, we cannot tell if that is optimal, if that is a good move, because we don't have any information about consumer satisfaction. So that's all. That's the end of chapter 2, and that is where I will stop in this video lecture. In the next video lecture, I will start talking about chapter 3, which talks about demand and supply. Well, thank you very much. Have a good day.